So remember this from last week. The first thing we have to do is identify the story point or the idea or the joke. That's the first thing. Then choose the best camera angle and composition to tell the story point as clear as we can. Now we storyboard away. And then what's up next after we've completed that point? Can you use the same camera setup or composition? If yes, board away. If no, what new camera angle will you need to cut to help tell this story point clearly? So we're still on that same trajectory right now. And here is what we did last week. So remember this? The royal grounds beyond the castle. A silhouetted figure running across the grounds takes cover behind an object. They peek out from behind the tree, peering through a telescope. Through the telescope, we get a view of the king on the balcony. Telescope lowers, revealing the assassin. They look uncomfortable, but know they have no choice. They take out a weapon and take aim at the royal figure in the distance. We didn't do that part, but we'll take a look at what we did so far. So in the thumbnail template, we were just trying to figure out what the environment looked like. I went for the super generic shot of the cliche castle to introduce a character running into a shot. This is our establishing shot. It's pretty wide. If this is a fixed camera position, meaning they're shooting with a very long camera lens, the camera they just zoom out with the camera lens to get to this shot. So there's different ways of doing this shot. But in this case, we're even wider now in a wide shot, and we have enough room for a character to come running into our shot and hiding behind this tree, okay? So that's that first point. We cut to a reverse angle of the character popping out because we want to see him looking through a telescope. And I haven't covered it yet in the cutting guideline, but this is a story point that I really can't tell very well in this wide shot. Therefore, I needed to cut to a new angle, which is this one, to continue that new story point. So we have the character looking through the spyglass or through the telescope here on that first page, and it looks something like this is what they're looking at through the telescope. The image comes into focus and we have the king drinking from his giant goblet. Then we cut back to a closer shot. This is probably what you call this is actually a close-up now. We went from the previous shot, which was shooting from his chest up, now to a more intimate shot of him looking and pulling his mask down now, okay? So that's where we ended up. So now we have it lowers, revealing our guy. They look uncomfortable, but they know they have no choice. So we have to do a little bit of acting here, like a guy looking very concerned. So they take out their weapon and they take aim at the real figure in the distance. So first of all, we have to identify, what do we have to identify? The main story points first on that list. Remember the list was, first is, what is a story point? Well, that story point is, we have a guy that looks a little uncomfortable, but he knows he has no choice. So what that means to me is a guy who first looks uncomfortable and he looks maybe a little unsure, and then he gets resolve on his face. Okay, that's the next story point. But I know that they have a guy, and if I read a little bit further down, that they take out a type of weapon. That's the next idea. And so I have to be aware of that with the chess move, which is just, the chess move is just looking down the road a little bit in the storytelling to see if there's something I have to do in my current shot to help this new idea come to fruition. So I'm looking at that. I know that from the acting standpoint, I can tell the story of the guy looking very uncomfortable here and having resolve in here, but him grabbing the weapon means that I might have to cut to a new shot or change my camera on that. So I'm being aware of that, but I'm choosing to stay in this shot right now, just so you guys know. I'm gonna turn off the red and I'm gonna find my dude. But what I'm gonna do now, everybody, is I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna start going into thumbnailing and my brainstorming on an individual story panel, just so you guys know. So I'm much more comfortable doing that. So I have my guy behind a tree, and here's my tree in the foreground right here. Imagine this is the same thing. So he looks very determined in this shot. So I got my guy, make sure my eye line's working here. I don't have much on the costuming area of this right now, so I'm gonna keep it really generic. So I have my drawing. I'm gonna turn off that stuff now. I don't need that anymore. I want the guy to first look unsure, so I have to fulfill that story point right now of my guy feeling unsure. So I'll just do a quick little drawing of him with his head down, maybe eyes down. This is definitely more in the land of an animator's expertise, where they're gonna figure out how to make the characters act and behave. But this is my super simple way of doing it. Proportions are a little bit off, but it's okay. And I'm choosing this. This is what I would call a close-up shot. It's close, it's intimate. I can see my characters acting more clearly, and that's the reason why I'm picking this angle. So if I can, between these two angles, I can toggle on and off. If you look over here towards this side, I'm toggling the image on and off I'll make it a little bit bigger for you guys. And I think maybe one more pose. And I know, Juan, I think you were asking last time about acting and performance maybe going too much, but I think for something like this, it might help to actually do something like this where my guy looks a little bit more stressed out. And I might just do that, and I'll just put on my paint behind brush, I'll paint over like a cell to cover up the previous drawing, and I'll have that. I'll go from, he looks down, and then maybe the eyes just squint. Either, you know, to make the guy feel like he's a little bit more in conflict. And even though we aren't having him physically say a word, just the acting alone hopefully will imply that there's something going on with this guy. And then if you want to get even in more in the weeds in this, and this is something we don't have to always do, but if I want to make his body move down a little bit, I'll use free transform and hit distort, and I'll pull the head body a little bit like that. And so when he closes the eyes, you get a little bit of that shift right there. So now I want him to look eyes open and resolve. I might just grab this drawing below and drag it up. And now I've got my guy. The first story point is they look uncomfortable, but now that they have no choice. I can't read my own writing. So they have no choice, which means I'm interpreting it from a guy who looks uncomfortable, but then says, I have to fuck it. I have to kill this guy. So I'm going to go from uncomfortable, but I got to do it. So then he opens his eyes back up, and then I would just go to maybe one more pose like this. I might just bring this drawing back because it saves me on drawing. And this will be the one of him looking more resolved. Then I'll have him look up, but in this time when he looks up, I'm going to change his expression a little bit. I'll turn the opacity down on this drawing first, and then I'll onion skin it, and I'll just draw him with more resolve. You know, the brows down. So now in this version, he just looks a little bit more, you know, like game's on. And I'll turn that up and just see how that looks. It looks a little bit better. Yeah, it's okay. It's not terrible. And that's my resolve picture. And again, this camera angle I'm picking, which is a close-up, allows the audience to be in tight enough to see this character's expression change without losing any of the acting. So if I were to bring it in over here on bridge, and I just cycle through these drawings, we could see him going from here, there, and then back up to that. And I'm just using these. So that has fulfilled that story point, okay? Now that I fulfilled that story point, what is the next one? Taking aim. So they take out a type of weapon and take aim at the royal figure in the distance. So this probably feels like it's a couple of different angles. I have to first show him taking out the weapon, and then I have to have him take aim at the royal figure in the distance. So this taking aim part right here, taking aim, is my little chess move. In other words, I've got to figure out how to take this idea here and go into this idea here. So how do I do that? And how many shots do I need to do that? Well, the first answer to that, so I have some clarity and some focus, is it's going to be based off of my current shot. They're taking out the weapon. So my question I'm going to ask myself is, can I have my hero character take out the weapon in this shot? And if I want to have him use a bow and arrow, can I show that in this shot? And my feeling, the answer to this is, I can begin that idea in this shot, but then I'll have to cut to a new angle to continue that story point. But the one thing I want to do that I'm realizing that I didn't do in any of these drawings is I want to have him pull an arrow out from his quiver, but I didn't add it to these drawings. So what I'm going to do, just make it real fast, and I will add it to these drawings. This is part of me just roughing out quickly, but I feel like I need to have this quiver here, and here's a little strap. We'll just put a bunch of arrows here. So I have a bunch of arrows right here in my quiver, and then I can begin that process of him shooting or loading the arrow by him grabbing an arrow from here. So maybe I'm thinking now, as I'm acting out in my room, like what hand, I have to imagine that one hand already has his hand on his bow. So I'm going to say, what if ultimately in the chess move, let's just think about the chess move here. What do I want it to look like when he's actually shooting his bow and arrow? My feeling is I probably want something like this. And I want this arm out here. This is his left arm holding the bow and arrow. And I want the other arm like this. That's his right arm. And then he's got one eye open, one eye closed. So my feeling is, if this is part of me working out my chess move, so I don't start boarding it out in the wrong direction, meaning choosing the wrong arms. This is a great example of why I've got to figure out ultimately where will I end up. Now this is not maybe the camera angle I'm going to pick, But this is certainly what needs to happen. My screen direction is going from left to right. So I'm maintaining screen direction. And this is back to what I talked to you guys about earlier, which is if you can't figure out your camera angle, at least start working on what kind of action you want to have happen. And how dynamic it looks and how cool it looks, depending on where you put the camera, can be determined afterwards. But I know that I want this to happen, which means, so you guys just understand, the bow needs to be in the left hand for this to happen, which means the arrow is in the right hand. This is the right hand here, okay? Which means if I go back to this drawing, I want to have my hero grab the bow, grab an arrow with his left hand, and imagine that, I'm going to zoom out for you guys just so you have better context for this. Imagine if you take this entire drawing and we just zoom out like this, really, really wide. And I draw my tree in. And this is not a part of the normal boarding part, but I'm just going to show you guys what it is I'm talking about. If this is my tree, here's my ground plane. I'm going to imagine that this arm back here, as he's standing like this, he's probably a little still too big, so I'll make him I'm going to bring him a little higher. But that this hand right here is already holding the bow and arrow behind the tree, okay? I'm just pretending that so that I know that this arm right here that is hanging down here needs to come and grab my bow and my arrow up there. That's what I'm imagining in my shot. And that's why I'm trying to pre-plan it by doing this extra drawing here, which means that if I just, for whatever reason, without thinking about what my actual physical action is, ended up taking this left arm, which is a natural action of his left arm coming up like this and grabbing an arrow like this, then I have to change my camera. But here's the point: is if I do this like this and I bring up the left arm instead and grab an arrow, which can totally work, now I'm kind of married to him holding the arrow in the right arm. And I don't want to do a thing where I have to storyboard him changing hands. That's just a pain in the ass. And the reason why I want to have the left arm holding the bow is that I think I get better facial acting on this shot. And that's something I failed to mention to you guys. So let's just turn this down. If I shoot like this in this angle here, and I have his right hand holding the arrow, I can see his face very clearly because I don't have his right arm blocking him. So if I just did this, for example, if I chose to put this arm in action instead, then I'm risking maybe blocking his face. I know I have the hand blocking it, but somehow I feel like this is probably still more effective. And I'm measuring, I'm weighing a couple of different options here, everybody. And one is, if I choose to do it like this, and this is a good example of working these ideas out before you actually execute the actual idea. So we're actually kind of working out together. If I chose to put the arrow in this arm, that means that the arrow, the trigger arm, is going to be the one that might be hidden from our view. Fingers kind of hold like that, and it might be okay. And there's something about this, I just feel like it closes his body off more in this shot. I don't know, something about this angle, I don't find it to be as intriguing. And it's something about having him in this angle where the front of his body is opened up to camera. I feel like it's just, it's easier for me to read and see the character. So I'm choosing, for this reason, to have him shoot in this direction with his front being exposed. So with that choice made, I've got to now go in and make the correction. I can't use this arm, which means I have to use this arm, the right arm, to grab my arrow. I'll just turn his face down a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. I'll turn it down, and then I can add basically a hand coming to grab an arrow. So the hand comes up like that. It looks a little weird, but I'm going to say I'm happy with that drawing for now. It's just about telling the story. I want to get through this quickly. Let's say he grabs the arrow. I'm not going to draw the entire pose of him grabbing it, but suffice to say it would look something like this. I would have the arrow being pulled like that, hand attached to the shoulder, 2 fingers. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just got to be clear enough. So he grabs it like that, pulls it down. And then what I would do, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I need to eventually get to some kind of shot like this or like that. So what I'm going to do is, and I'm thinking in my head, that as he moves, as he begins to step out from behind the tree, that can be an ideal time to cut on action. When you cut on action, the cuts become less visible. And it's probably really the bigger story point is, I can't tell the story any further than this. I don't want to be super tight as he's shooting with the arrow. And I also thought, okay, there might be some cool action of him loading the arrow and going behind a rock or hiding behind another tree. So I have to think about that too. And so as he does this, and he's going to start stepping out from behind the tree, I know I need to have him step out. So I'm imagining the camera panning to screen left in order to capture this action, which means I have to move the tree. This whole thing, I'm going to move over that way to imply that I'm moving him out from behind the tree. So I'm going to start sliding his body like this. So I'll move that. And just by doing that, you can feel that he's coming out from behind the tree. I'll bring his body out like that. So we can see him coming out like this. And I'm going to have to visualize in my head, what does it look like for my dude loading up his arrow? And typically, I think they load it up down by the bow is still below them. So maybe I'll have this hand with the arrow. He's holding it like this. He'll lower it like that. So we have that action right here. And then this arm is going to be seen a bit more. And I know I could tell the story in this shot. Honestly, I probably could do this. I could probably have him ultimately step back a little bit from camera. But what I don't like is now I have to really cheat, like maybe the forearm, thumb, fingers, arrow. And I don't want to do that. I just don't like that. So I think I will still cut on action. So I'm going to have, as he walks out in this shot, like that, that's where I might cut to something like this shot that I originally drew just as an example to show you his arrow arm, but I think now I can even use this drawing. I'm going to use this. So now I've got him coming and doing this action. So I'm going to cut on action to a wider, this is called a, what shot? Do you guys remember what this is called? When you see the full body? It's a full shot. So I'm going to cut to something like this to continue the story point. So I'm telling one story point of him loading the bow and arrow in a couple of different camera shots because I don't feel comfortable telling it in this close-up. So I'm going to cut to a new angle, a wider shot to continue the story thought, okay? So here's my background. We're going to just flesh out a little bit more information on the background. Trees, maybe there's a couple of hills back here. I'm not going to get too busy. I'll trim that down a little bit. And then my guy, now we'll see, by him stepping out behind the tree, we're starting to see the bow and arrow for the first time. And put this little more body weight on this leg as he walks out. Now we've got the bow and arrow, the arrow in this hand right here as he's holding it. He lowers it here, and I'll walk him out a little bit more from the tree. So I'll pan the background towards screen right and pull my guy towards screen left. So I'm separating him from the tree. And I'm not even worrying about the footsteps. I'm not going to get in those weeds right now. But I just want to make sure that as I do this action here, I know that eventually he's going to just be standing. So I'll just have the guy standing in this shot here. And then because I know that I'm going to have his arms crossing in front of his body, I'm not going to draw the arms on the same layer. I'm literally going to draw his arms on a new layer so that I don't have to erase stuff. So I know that this hand will be loading the arrow somewhere around this point here. Here's the hand with the bow. And so maybe I'll put, and I don't mind keeping the hands maybe in the same layer because they're not right now currently blocking each other. So I know that it feels like they kind of hold it like this. So now I'll turn off the body beneath. I'll fill the arms in white so that we have a nice silhouette across my drawing. I'll fill that drawing in like that. And by doing something like this, I'm allowing the hands to do the work for me. And again, not having to erase the body underneath. If I didn't like this drawing, for example, is that now I have the benefit of me saying, oh, you know what? I don't really like the way I put these arms. Well, I can put them anywhere I want. I don't have to worry about them. I don't have to worry about erasing them off the body. So now that I've got that pose, the next pose would be just him doing the aiming shot, okay? So we're gonna just turn that down and have him go to this shot that I was talking about before where arm is out like this and maybe arch the back, so put the arm forward a little bit more like that. Push his head back a little bit more. And so he's gonna be having one eye squinting. Right now I'm not really worried about being too on model or getting the proportions exactly right. I would definitely, generally I don't draw this fast when I'm boarding. So now I know that this arm, because my the left arm is not blocking the body, I'm putting it on the same layer. But the arm with the arrow, I will put on another layer. And I know that I've looked at some videos where they kind of hold their fingers like this. So I'll put this on a new layer. Here's the forearm. armpit, goes into lats. So I'll just fill that in, and now I'll just add the arrow, which is going to be incredibly long in this drawing, which actually feels like really too long. I'm going to change the arm on this and shorten it a little bit and create a little bit more shortening. So I'm going to put the fist around here. I think I'm going to try something like that because I don't like the length of what the arrow can become off of that drawing. So I think that's a little bit better. And I'm going to draw the string on this arm here, coming to here and to here. And I'll put the arrow here. One way of doing a straight line is holding down the shift key. So I'll put a dot here, hold the shift key, and I'll put a line there. And by holding the shift key, it makes a really straight line for me. So now I've got him loading up the arrow. And then let's take a quick peek and see how it looks. If I want to cycle through these drawings, what I end up doing is I end up going to bridge and having him look down. He loads, and then, yeah, that works fine. So I have my guy here, takes a breath, grabs the arrow, begins to move out, and then on that, I'm cutting to him moving this way, his body that way. He stops and loads. So the reason why I'm cutting to this new shot is that I don't want to tell the story in this angle. I feel like I want to see his whole body come out like that, step out from the tree, and first take his aim. There's another story point that I want to point out that we didn't talk about yet, which is from their point of view, he begins to aim the weapon and line up with the king, and they take one last breath, and then their view is blocked by a dark figure right in front of them. Okay, this is another chess move, potential chess move thing, and it's actually something to be aware of, because this is where the story really begins, right here in this place. And my thinking is, if the idea is that somebody is appearing out of nowhere and blocking this guy's view, I think it's probably helpful to create enough shots in here, or have some shots in the scene where I'm wide enough to show an empty forest. And it just helps me sell the idea that eventually someone's going to pop out from somewhere. And yet, in the previous wide shot, like, it's pretty wide here. There's nobody around in the area, that there's nobody there in this shot. The other thing of acting we can do, which I think is probably a smart thing to do, is have him look around the forest to make sure that the place is empty, so that when someone does pop out, it becomes very, very obvious. So what we could even do before he takes aim is I could have him in this shot here, before I go to this one, I could even have him do this. I could even do something like this where I have him look over. So I will save this drawing beneath. I'm going to make a copy of it just in case I need a duplicate later. I don't want to redraw that head. I'm going to save it. So now I have him look over like this. And in order for me to add, I'm being additive in the storytelling now. And what that does is I need to add, so from here to here, that'll be 16. I'm adding new drawings in here. So the reason why I space out the number of panels is if I want to add new drawings and new ideas, I don't have to go to 16 or 17. When I go to 17, I get lost in the numbering system. So I can add, because I didn't space them out that much, I'm going to add 15, 15A, 15B. I'll go to my alphabet now. So if I want to have them look here, I will call this 15C just to give myself some room. But now the next story point that I'm creating that's not scripted is the guy looks around the forest to make sure it's empty. How can I sell this idea really clearly? And my question I'm going to ask out to you guys, is this the best way to have a guy look around like this? And my feeling is, if I go to an extreme close-up of his eyes, then I can sell the story point more clearly to my audience that he's looking around. And what does that look like? It might just look like something like this, where I'm really tight on his eyes, like this. And some of his hair right there. So I'm like this. And because I don't want to draw the pupils on the same layer because I want to have them look around, I'm drawing the pupils on a separate layer like this. And then I could do something like this where off of this shot here, this is getting in closer on his eyes. It is telling the audience to look at this specific piece of information. And I think by getting in tighter, we're selling the idea of him looking around the forest. And I'm going to make another layer, and I'll have another eye go like that. So now I have him doing this. And what does that tell us, everybody? That he's looking around the forest. And that is helping tell a new story point, which means I'm about to kill somebody, but I want to make sure there's nobody here to witness what I'm doing. And by having him do this now, which is him thinking he's doing his due diligence. When that person shows up later in the script and blocks his view, it will become that much more surprising because he did what he thought was right before, which is, I'm going to make sure nobody's watching me. I'm going to make sure the forest is empty. So by me adding this new piece of storytelling that wasn't scripted, I'm going to make this story point right here, this one about being blocked by a dark figure, I'm going to make that resonate even more because he spent the time to make sure he was alone. So this is part of what we have to do as story artists, is to find ways of making the script better. But now that we've done this, my next question is, how can we make the story point even clearer? Go to a POV shot. Show through his eyes that he's looking through the forest. What is he looking at? In other words, when we look at these board panels right here of him walking out like that and then stopping and looking like that, and we do this, where we're showing him looking, it's asking a question. What is he looking at? And the audience is going to wonder also, what is he looking at? We have to answer that question by showing what he's looking at. So that's the answer to that. So how do we do that? We just show a point of view shot. So I'm just going to literally draw, here's a floor plane here. I'm going to just draw some bushes in the foreground. I'll draw a bunch of trees. And I'm going to be making this shot into a panning shot. So shot, here's more plants back here, maybe just to change the shape language, some rocks, a couple of trees in the background. And I'm going to take this drawing and I'm going to move it this direction. And I'm going to keep drawing on it. I'm going to put a larger tree in the foreground to give some depth to my shot. I'm going to put another thing back there. I'll keep panning the drawing over like this, and I'll continue to put a different bush back here. Maybe there's a weird lone cactus in this weird forest just for some random, just to create variety. More trees back here, and a little bit more. And maybe there's a hillside up here with more trees. But the whole point we're trying to show is it's an empty forest. So what I'm going to do is I'll have this drawing in here and I'll pan this drawing over like that to imply that he's looking around the forest. And then one more drawing and let's see what that looks like. So I got my guy coming out. He looks around and I have this panning shot now. So that helps tell the story, right? Empty forest. The only thing is I don't like the eye line looking up so high, so I'll change that. And I'll just do this, and I'll pull this, because the pupils are not on the same layer, I can move them anywhere I want. And the other thing, everybody, I want you guys to pay attention to is, if we look at his eye line, it's going from, he's looking to the right and then looking to the left. And I want the pan to match his eye direction. So I'm going from looking towards screen right. This is his screen right. It's camera left. In other words, it's the left of the screen, but if we were actually him, he's looking to his right and then he's looking that direction. So I want to match that camera move, which is the same eye direction if we were looking through his eyes. So then after that, now I'm creating more information. Once I come off of this, guess what I have to do? I've got to come back to him looking satisfied. So I could either come back to this drawing, which is the one of him looking, I think in this case, I'll just go back to this drawing here. And now I feel like I've made that moment more clear. Here's my guy looking up. I'm not sure about this, but I gotta do it. Pulls out his stick, walks out, about to load, looks around. Empty forest, satisfied. And then he can take his aim. So now we've done all those story points. We've got the guy looking uncomfortable, but he knows he has no choice. He takes out his weapon, and before taking out aim, we've added a new idea in the script, everybody. The new idea is right in here, looking around. So we've added a new idea in here, and we have to fulfill that idea all the way to its entirety. So how many different shots did it take me to do that new idea? Well, here's the first, again, even when you're adding new content, you have to first ask yourself, what is the new idea? What's the story point? Well, the new story point we're adding is he's going to look around the forest to make sure the forest is empty and he's alone. So then now that I know my story point, I have to begin the idea of him looking off, which is the first part. But I want to really make sure that I'm letting the audience know that he's looking around the forest. So I feel like I need to go to a clearer shot to sell that story point. So I can't tell that story point all in one shot. So I need to go to an extreme close-up to see his eyes looking around the forest. That fulfills that next story point. So then, now that I fulfilled the point of him looking around, I need to show what he's looking at. Empty forest, empty forest. And now I can go back to him aiming the arrow. So now that I fulfilled that story point, we can see I've told the story idea. This one idea I've told in how many shots, everybody? I started it in one. I went to this one as the next shot. And then I went to this shot here. I've gone 3 different shots to tell one idea. Then I conclude it by coming back here and then having him begin to aim. That concludes that new idea. So we'll go to the next story point. Next story point is, from their point of view, we can see the tip of the weapon is perfectly lined up with the king. They take one last breath before they're about to unleash the weapon. So I have to figure out how to draw that. So I'm looking down the barrel of his arrow, basically. And so if I'm trying to figure out what it looks like to be looking down the barrel of his own arrow, basically what I want to do is I want to put the camera right here, everybody. That's where I want to put the camera. I want it to be in front of him as if it's his eyes, okay? So if I want that to be working, then I know that I have to be looking straight down. It's a push perspective shot, but I know that it could take a couple of tries. But the first thing is I want to put that castle back here. So I'm going to just do the generic castle. Here's my balcony. Here's my king. I think we did the whole thing on a hill. So maybe there's a little bit of forest around here, and then we did this hill idea, right? It's almost like on a weird volcano. That's where the thing is. Then maybe in the foreground, I'll put ground plane for where the cliff begins for my dude. In the foreground, I'll put some trees here, like that. I do know that I want to have a person pop up. I know that in this shot, it says someone blocks his view, which means eventually I'm going to have a giant head right here, blocking my view. So I need to make sure that A, I'm not drawing on the background layers as I tend to do in these demos, but B, that I have enough room in my shot so this person can go boop and block my shot. So I feel like this can work fine. So now that I have this information done, I've got to be able to imagine what it looks like with my hand out in front of me. So I don't know if you guys can see me, but I'm putting my hand out in front of me. I'm looking at what my hand looks like extended, and it looks something like this. And this is his kind of wrist guard he's got on, and this is the bow part. And I want to put it over here a little bit more so I can see my subject matter. I also want my arrow tip to be lined up. I know my arrow is technically on my right hand, so it would be angled facing screen left, but I'm going to cheat this drawing just to make it for this demo and to make it work. I feel like I want the arrow to be kind of like here, which means I'm actually going to bring this arm out more over here and put the arm going that way. That'll actually work better. I think that actually works a little bit better. Yeah. So I'm going to do this and show a little bit more of the thumb here and the fingers like that. And the arrow, hopefully now will be more lined up like that. So let's get this down like that. And the arrow will be somewhere like this. Here's my tip. We've got something like that. And then we might even see maybe some of the string here. Not really sure. But that's my shot right, everybody. Okay, you guys can see that? So now I have my guy taking aim in this shot. I'll put that in one layer so I can move it around if I need to. And here's my guy lining his arrow up right here on my background character. And then what does the script say? They aim at the royal person in the background. From their view, we can see the tip of the weapon is perfectly lined up with the king. They take one last breath before they unleash their shot. So here's my shot right here in the foreground. I might want to make it more cinematic and first bring my attention to my subject matter, which is the king in the background, all right? So my king in the background is going to be on my background layer right here. That's my king, okay? That's where I want everybody to look. So if I want to make this foreground element feel more out of focus, I might just first put a little bit of tone on my foreground element to make it stand out as a better silhouette. And I'll take all the elements in that group, including the string. I'm going to just copy this whole group and I'm going to merge it by hitting Command E to make it one layer. And I'm going to put a filter on it. I'm going to put a Gaussian blur, a heavy Gaussian blur like this. And what that does is it's telling the audience to look in the distance. First at the character out here. Look at this guy here. That's where I want the audience to look right now, at this guy. Then to bring focus onto the weapon that's going to kill that guy, I'm choosing an order to go from that to making the weapon clear, and now I'll make the background blurry by merging the whole layers, and I'll hit Command F or Command Control F on my keyboard to make that all blurry. So now by going from the background to the foreground, I'm bringing focus to the weapon that will now take that guy's life. So that's the other part of the storytelling that I just fulfilled. And I'm choosing, again, this is a literal point of view shot that is helping me tell that piece of the storytelling. So then the next story point that we have to hit is, and by the way, I know this is long and boring, but this is the process of boarding. The next thing is, they're lined up with the king. They take one last breath before they unleash the weapon. So in other words, I've got to have the guy take one breath before he fires. I'm not going to add that in. Well, I probably should, just so you guys understand. So the question is, now that I've identified that next story point, which is my guy taking aim at the subject matter in the distance. So now that I know my next story point is that I have to show my guy taking a breath. Can I tell that story point in this shot? No way. There's no way I can do that. So I've got to cut to a new angle to show him taking a breath. But the question is, where do I put the camera to show the intensity on his face? To show that grit and determination. My feeling is I want to be in pretty close to my guy. I want to be in tight enough that I see his face, I see his eye, like this, looking, determined at the subject matter. So I want to be something like this. And I also want that, I know the hand would be, fingers are kind of split. I want to get this arm up like that. And then I'm thinking on another layer, all these are on another layer. I want maybe the hand with the bow somewhere in this area. And by putting on a separate layer, I can move it around. Maybe I can make it even bigger to push the foreshortening, and then not worry too much about seeing the rest of the arm because it's being blocked by the hand. So then I can draw, I got this hand on this layer here, and then I can put my arrow, and I'm going to just draw a line from here to there, put it on top of that layer, and I got my arrow like that. And what I'm making sure to really not block is seeing my hero's eye. I want to make sure that the expression is red. If I put his eye down here, or I'm sorry, if I had put the arrow a little higher, then I wouldn't be able to see the intensity on his face. And I really want that to read. For your boards, everybody, the most important thing is seeing the faces of your characters. That's the most important thing. But I'm cutting off some of the eyes, so I'm thinking, okay, maybe I lower both these arms a little bit. All three arms I'm going to lower just a tad. Like that, because I want to see his eyes a little bit more clearly. I like that I can see his lower lid, so I'm lowering the whole element. So now I'm going to go from here to this shot, and then our guy takes a deep breath, and I will not draw that because that's an extra acting beat. But the whole point is my guy takes a deep breath in and out. Then I would have to go back to the last story point, which is they take one last breath before they're about to unleash their weapon until their view is blocked by a dark figure. It's not written, but basically it means that I have to cut back to a shot of the castle before this action of it being blocked by this dark figure can happen. So how can I do that? Well, I got to go back to my other setup, which is this shot already, which I already have, which is great. So I can put that one in here. So as our guy is going to take aim, I want to bring the focus back to the castle. So I'll go back to my previously saved drawing and my previously cleared castle, and I'll go back from here to there. And all I have to do is bring in my person from nowhere. So then now that I've had this drawing set up, here, the last piece of the puzzle is their view is blocked by a dark figure right in front of them. So now I just have to figure out how that person comes in. Does that person come in from left and right like this? Or do they come out that way? Do they come in upside down? There's so many different ways of doing it. I mean, and actually, it could be funny if the person literally hung down upside down like this, because it's way more surprising. So maybe I'll do that first, just for the heck of it. And I'm going to put them in the dark, just to make it a little bit harder to read. I'm going to make them bigger too. And the idea is that they're going to block the entire view of this hero character. So I have to put this layer beneath the layers of the arrow like that. That has to be beneath. Maybe I'll make them a little smaller. So it would happen something like this, that I would do. I would start from here, from their point of view, and then suddenly this thing would lower down very quickly into camera like that. And that would block their view. But because this person is in a closer range that is right next to the arrow, they would also be blurry, right? Because the focal range that we're looking at is actually the distance. And the reason why I want to keep this person blurry is that I want it to be, I don't want to know what this person looks like yet. So that's the next story point. Boom. They lower it in the foreground, blocking their view. So the last thing I'm going to ask everybody is this. What happens now from a natural standpoint, even if we didn't read the script pages? Can anybody tell me what we would have to show next? If someone dropped right down in front of your view, what do you think we have to show next from a storytelling standpoint?
The main character's reaction.
1000% yes. Totally. We've got to answer that. We've created something that is, if you look at a record album, there's an A side and a B side. The A side is there's a question. What is this? We got to go to the B side, and we have to pay off that answer by showing a reaction. Even if it doesn't say in here that the person is reacting, and look at the script pages. I didn't even write that in here. Until their view is blocked by a dark figure right in front of them. Hey, name please. The assassin jumps back, startled and defensive. But by that point, it's too late. So I wrote it that way and kind of purposely fudged the reaction time because I want people to figure out when that's supposed to happen. This is very typical in scripts. They don't write in reactions at all. So when I go to this shot here, I got to go to that reaction. I have to show what that person's feeling. So do I have those drawings already saved? Thankfully, I do. All I have to do is go to my bridge and take out this drawing right here, and I can just add that into my narrative. And let's see how that would look first of all. So my guy's looking, and he's first in here. He takes a deep breath, his point of view, and then suddenly this thing drops down. Boop. From there, we have to show him reacting in this shot. And this, so the question is, off of this, we just answered it. What's the next story point? We have to show him react. So the next question is, now that I know what the next story point is, what camera angle can I come up with to show him reacting? Well, thankfully, you want to come back to this shot. You already have the drawing done. You don't have to draw a new one because this is the shot we've already used. We've established him deep in concentration. So the reaction should really be coming back to this same drawing right here. So we just have to have him react in this shot. And that's just having his eyes pop open and have him freak out. So that's really how we would do it. So the first thing again is identifying the main story point, then figure out your best camera angle, and then figure out how many shots you might need to tell that story point. So in this case, in the beginning, with my guy grabbing the arrow, I knew the first point was he looks uncomfortable, but then he has a sense of resolve. I can do that. Then the next thing is he's got to load his weapon. Well, I can begin that idea in this shot, so I started in this shot. I had him grab the bullet, or which is the arrow in this case, and he begins to walk away. But the next story point of him continuing to load the weapon, which in this case is an arrow, I can't show in this shot. I'm choosing not to because I know that by cutting to a wide, I can help sell an empty forest. So by cutting to a wide, I'm continuing that idea of him loading the arrow. Now that he's loaded the arrow, I have a new point that I'm bringing on, that I'm adding myself, which is I'm going to have him look around the forest to make sure it's empty. Well, now that I've identified the story point of him looking around to make sure it's empty, how do I do that? Well, I can begin that idea in this shot. So I'm going to do it. So I'm going to have him begin to look over here. He's looking across. But now I'm asking myself, can I be clearer? What can I do to really reinforce the idea of him looking around? Well, I can go to a close-up of his eyes, looking around to really show him concentrating. And by doing that, it's clarifying a story point. But I know that I can't tell it in this shot. It's just not going to be as clear and as meaningful and as intimate. So by going to a close-up of his eyes looking around, I'm fulfilling that idea. Now it brings up another question, which is he's looking around. Well, what the hell is he looking at? I've got to cut to a new angle to show him looking at an empty forest. And then I got to cut back to finishing him looking satisfied, which could be on a close-up, by the way, if we wanted to cover it on a medium close-up of him kind of smiling and then turning back and then loading the weapon. but I'm choosing to be lazy in this case because just for time. And I'm going to have him maybe smile here and then begin to load the weapon here. So the next story point is I have to show the weapon looking and aiming at our victim. Can I do that in this shot? I cannot. Therefore, I must cut to a new angle to basically show that new piece of information, which is advancing the storytelling. I'm telling new information that I couldn't tell in my previous shot. So by cutting to here, I'm advancing the new idea, which is I'm aiming at this target. I see the target and I see the weapon that's aiming at him. Or if I want to reverse it, as I'm looking at this now, I'm thinking maybe it'll be better to do this. I have him pull his weapon, we see the weapon, and we see what he's looking at there. That can work too. And this is a case of the editor and the director may change the order of these two rack focusing moments to pick what's stronger. And as I'm looking at it now, I'm thinking, now maybe it's better to start off like that and then show the weapon pointing at the person. After that, I need to show him take a deep breath. So I can't do that in this shot. I have to go to a close-up of him doing that here. Takes a deep breath, and then he aims. So I would just go from here to here, and then the person lowering into the shot would be right here.